Hey everybody, it is episode 356.
We're talking framing your neurological habits today and how you really have no mental control over them. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Prime Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Skip Wyss, and as always, I have the beautiful Dr. Julie Wyss with us today. How are you today?
I'm good. I kind of like her color smash up here.
Trying to keep it flashy.
Oh, it's flashy.
You always look really pretty in green, and I bring the rainbow sometimes, because I want my Jesus back. So let's talk a little bit about neurological habits. This is something that chiropractors have. This is what we do. This is what we take care of. This is what we change in the body. But a lot of people feel that habits are mentally driven. They're emotionally driven, like they're thought process driven. And neurological habits are not thought process driven. They are learned neurologically biomechanical habits of the body and the nervous system, and they're detrimental. Even though those habits are what have helped you survive up to this point, they haven't necessarily helped you live a good life. They've helped you live a compensating life. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. I like this.
Yeah, and these neurological habits start when you're really, really little. They start when you're kids. They start when you're infants. And this is something that a lot of people think they can just switch. Like, I can just start the habit of, it takes, what do they say, 21 to 28 days to start a habit.
New habit,
right?
Yep.
A new habit. Well, that's mentally. And what you're trying to do is neurologically reprogram your body. And that takes years to do. Because it's taken years to get to this point in your life. It's taken decades at times to get to kind of the person you are, which isn't necessarily a good thing. And at that point, you have to then realize, okay, what do I have to do to change? And then where the real mental habit comes in is acceptance that it's going to take more than 3 months, 6 months, or even a year, where this could take multiple years to reverse the neurological entrainment that your body has learned to live in.
Well, I think this is like for us within our clinic, why we focus on pregnancy.
Yeah.
And why we focus on pediatrics, why we focus on kiddos, because right, if we can raise a healthy kid, they're not going to have these issues developmentally later on, right? We're helping to lay that good neurology, those really good habits in the beginning, because when that doesn't happen, right, that's where it's 32 years of a bad habit. Yeah. And that doesn't get changed overnight. We have to retrain and reprogram all of the wiring.
Well, yeah, because it's a pattern of poor neurological response or poor neurological communication. So when we have I have a bunch of notes that I have wrote out, Dr. Julie. So that's why if you guys see me looking down, I want to stay in my notes this time. Last episode I kind of got off, and I didn't want to do that, but it turned out to be a really good episode. But I really want to stay in line here because these are entrained, learned neurological things. And they come on through stress, they come on through toxins, they come on through trauma, they come on through poor posture, comes on through the birth process, it comes on through early childhood development, motor tics. All of these things are related to the nervous system itself. And the only way to change that is to get the body back to communicating to the one thing that will always run the same over and over and over again, which is the brain. Because the brain actually entrained these habits to begin with to protect itself. The body tried to protect the brain by starting its own habits. The brain then tried to reverse it, which usually it can't because it can't get the right communication it needs. So then the body starts doing its own thing. And that's when we get changes in like muscle postural patterns, right? Where if you look at yourself in the mirror, or you look at your wife from the back, or your husband from the back, or even your children with their clothes off, you will see, if you actually let your eyes look at them, you will see changes from side to side. You will see large spots and small spots. You will see round spots and flat spots. You will see hot spots and cold spots. You might even see, if you have a child with acne, you might actually see like acne scarring and acne changes along the spine in very specific areas and not throughout the whole thing. And if the body was truly in homeostasis or balance, we would see patterns matching from side to side. We would see muscle development the same from side to side. We would see the cranial bones of the skull look the same from side to side instead of asymmetrical. Everything should be symmetrical. Both sides of your brain work in harmony back and forth. But if I were to cut the communication between one lobe of your brain to the other lobe of the brain, there's a piece of tissue that sits between there. If we were to cut that, do you think that it can effectively talk from side to side then?
No.
No, and the body's the same way. If I start cutting and changing communication with vertebra in the spine not being in the right position, or the pelvis not being in the right position, or the neck not being in the right position, now the body can't effectively communicate to the brain.
The body will do everything that it can. Like the brain is just like amazing, right? But that's where it can only work with the tools that it has. And if that communication isn't there, it's going to do its own thing, which then is that bad habit.
And then it defaults to it. So anytime you try to change these neurological habits, which is through good exercise, through really good movement, through changing movement patterns, through getting adjusted from being subluxated, from actually seeing a chiropractor that looks at the nervous system and not just trying to treat a habit or a symptom, where we're trying to actually see what the nervous system's trying to communicate, then and only then can we get the changes. But as soon as these systems start to go haywire again, your brain and your neurology will default back. And that's the stuff that we work against constantly. Like the whole adage of, I need to see my chiropractor my whole life. Once I'm adjusted, I need to keep going back. Yeah, you do. You need to go back to get your body and make sure it's in balance and staying where it's supposed to, so you can function normally and stay healthy. It's such an important thing.
Because that's usually it's a once we revert back to that bad habit, maybe it's the headaches, maybe it was the IBS, maybe it was the infertility, the heartburn, those things pop up, but then sometimes it comes back worse.
Yeah, it comes back worse.
And then we forget about that. And then it's just every time that it goes back and it relapses, it's that much harder to then change that habit.
Well, then why do you think, this is a point for me that I wanted to ask you, is why do you think traditional habit breaking fails? Why do you?
Because we don't stick to it.
Right. And you can will yourself only so far. You can will yourself emotionally, mentally, physically. Listen to David Goggins, all these guys out there, and women too, that are getting on there. They use their platforms to provide emotional support. Tony Robbins, all these guys trying to will your mental capability into a better direction.
Well, side note, like that's the foundation of chiropractic, right? Part of it is the mental, emotional aspect of it, but it is also like the trauma aspects of it and the things we put into our body. So that is a big part of it, right? But we can't just do one thing without all the others.
Yeah, and if you don't do them all together, your body defaults to a survival mode again. And it's constantly trying to survive instead of thrive. I know it rhymes, and I know it's cliche, and I know a lot of people say thriving over surviving and all this stuff, but that is legitimately the truth. Where if your body is in a constant state of survival, it defaults to survival habits. And survival habits don't allow for upper cortical function. They don't allow for upper, they don't allow for brain growth. They don't allow for mental growth. You just stay in this quote unquote way of just the same rut over and over again, or some would say caveman living, or all these other things. But it's because your body gets put back into a survival mode when it's chronically under stress. And that comes back to some episodes that we recorded previously, even last year, with stress management. Because if you can't change the stress, your body will constantly try to stay in a survival mode, which means it defaults to poor neurological patterns. And then what happens is you can't get out of the survival mode.
Right.
But what's the easiest way to get out of survival mode? Adjusting. Getting getting your body back to being communicating like it's
Communication.
supposed to, being subluxation free, being interference free. I'm not saying that you need to go get adjusted constantly. You need to get checked for areas of interference and then get those adjusted, because those areas of interference cause the stress, correct?
But when you look at those that live, let's just say a little bit more calmer, maybe hands off, to the world, right? Their bodies are able to, when they get that adjustment, to handle those stressors better, and they can go longer between those visits. But when you have maybe high stress, like maybe your diet isn't good and you're just always burning it at both ends, that's why those people need those additional adjustments in between, because we're constantly pushing our bodies to the brink of survival.
Right. And that is something that you can't think your way out of, right? So can you think yourself out of subluxation?
I think that could be definitely a part of it, just like when sometimes people have cancer, right? If they can change their entire mindset, I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I think if we can start to change our mindset, yes, that can help that neurology. But again, we need all three things. We
Right.
can think it, but we also need the adjustment. And we have to also understand what our environment is, the things that we're putting into our body.
Exactly. So those traumas and those toxins as well, but the thoughts is a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely.
People can think themselves sick. They can think themselves into even higher forms of stress. And if they can't get their anxiety under control, if they can't get their body to come back down and their heart rate to change, and these are all things that lead to higher stress in your body, that will lead to chronic illness and chronic fatigue.
The opposite is also true, which we've talked about in the past, of who you surround yourself with, the things that you're reading, the things that you're consuming, the things that you're seeing constantly, right? If those turns from very negative to positive things, that is going to have a beneficial effect on your body as well.
So let's talk a little bit about how neurological habits are formed, because we've hit on this some, we really have, but let's just reiterate that a lot of these neurological habits will come from the birth process. When the baby gets subluxating coming out from being born, whether it's vaginally or cesarean, they still go through a lot of trauma passing through those two openings. Also repetitive injuries over time.
Learning to walk? Really?
Yeah. Well, that's where it comes back to childhood development, right?
Yeah.
Learning to walk, learning to crawl, learning to sit up. In fact, you fall over a lot when you're little when you learn to sit up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times as children learn to sit up, there's a reflex in their body called the Moro Reflex. That's their excitatory reflex that makes them extend back. That is slowly integrating and going away as they're learning how to sit up, because they're stimulating other reflexes to turn on, which shut off the Moro Reflex. The Moro Reflex, though, is a case in point, is something that can get switched on their entire life. And that will lead to delay in upper brain functioning. This is something you and I have talked about for 15 years. And it's something that we've prided ourselves on in our previous name clinic, Wyss Family Chiropractic, and now Prime Family, is we've been the same. We just changed the name, is this whole neurological functioning. And as children develop, how sometimes these reflexes that are there to help them survive in the beginning will get stuck and not get integrated into the brain. And that really negatively affects their development from that point forward.
It's like, I'm just trying to think of like a way to relate that, but it's like you can't ever get to that next level of the game, right? And that's where like these kids, they will look and they will continue to have their birthdays. They will continue to get taller. They'll continue through their years in school, but the brain can't get to that next step until we can go back and we can finish those developmental steps.
Exactly. And the only way to do that.
That's the struggle for school.
It is the only, exactly. And the only way to do that is through repetition and frequency. Whether it's your care plan with getting adjusted, whether it is your exercise program, postural changes, some of the physical therapy you may be in, or even if your children are seeing certified ophthalmologists and neurological eye training physicians, they're all trained to work on changing the body's neurology through frequency, through repetition. And there will be some that will say, well, you can't think your way that way. Well, you can though, because if you're constantly visualizing yourself staying up straight, getting healthy, running a life that is stress-free, it does work. It will start to help, but it's only one piece of the puzzle.
I think this is like a big, like this question comes up a lot. And I mean, we can talk about autism, we can talk about ADHD, but I think it is development with our kids being sicker and becoming sicker and sicker. And the learning challenges that these kids that are having. And it's, well, what's different? Well, if we go back to what did your pregnancy look like? Right? If we can talk about how much more stress that the world is under, the economy concerns, what our food and nutrition is like, that translates over to our pregnancies and then how our kids are born. And so our kids are born into like an environment that they were inside under that much more stress, cortisol levels being high, hormones are all just crazy. So that's the environment while they were inside of you. So before they're even born, they already are having these developmental challenges. And then we have the birth process. And if those things don't change, right, if they're not adjusted right after birth, it's this entire cascade. And so we can blame it on all these other outside sources, but it comes back to, I think, part of it, preconception. Right? The parents and what that situation looks like, and then development on the outside and what was missing for that baby.
Early care is essential to that baby then.
The rest of the world has chiropractors at births. Right? It is recommended. It's kind of like not mandated, but it's just that is the social norm.
It is.
And we can look at just everything else of what we do different within the US, right? Even our food. It's so backwards.
It is backwards, and it's trying then to, how do you reverse backwards to go forwards? But are you going forward in the right direction?
Right.
Is what you're doing for your body going to actually give it the health it needs, or is it going to be detrimental? And everything that you do, if you're choosing to start a new habit, you can sit there and be like, okay, long term, what is this going to do? You know, if I'm starting a new habit of running every day, long term, what is it going to do to my body? Is it going to affect my cardiovascular strength? Is it going to affect my heart? Could it negatively affect my blood pressure or positively affect my blood pressure? Could it negatively or positively affect my heart rate? Could it cause me a heart attack when I'm in my 60s? If I'm just starting to do running now in my 40s? Like, what are some things? Maybe I should look at training in a different way that helps decrease the stress to my body, which then allows my body to go from a fight or flight state to a rest and digest state, which then helps the body heal.
Because not all movement is equal.
No,
right?
not all movement is equal. And not all movement is actually good for your body. Super stressful things on your body, like causing lots and lots of stress. There are people out there that say the only way to get positive change on your body is to stress it, make it uncomfortable. To a point, I agree with that. But I don't agree with causing tremendous amounts of stress over long periods of time, expecting your body to have a positive health benefit. Case in point is marathon runners and then ultra marathoners, where they run super long distances for their bodies. And over time, it does actually have a detrimental effect on their body instead of a positive effect. Yes, the exercise is good for them, but they're never getting out of a fight or flight stress zone.
Right.
They're not in a zone of healing. They're in a zone of competition constantly. And that will negatively affect them over time. And that's not okay. You know? So this has been a really fun episode, because talking about these neurological habits, and then what are they there? How are they entrained? How are they entrenched in the body? And then how can we actually positively change them? Because you can. You just need a little bit of outside help and a little bit of outside input. That's where chiropractic comes in. And that's where we've been since 1895. You know, when people are out there asking for who concentrates on the nervous system, it's chiropractors. There's no one else that actually concentrates on neurological load and trying to get the body back to communicating to de-stress itself internally, which then allows it to function normally. And then that gets expressed externally, which allows you to feel better.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. I absolutely do. This has been a super, super fun episode. So, I mean, if you're out there and moms and dads, you know, if you're pregnant, if you have babies, if you have children, if you have a family in general, and you need to see if their nervous systems are working correctly or not, come over to see us. Call us. We'll help you. We'll help you in our community. We will help you here in Green Bay. We will help you via phone if we have to. I field calls from all over the United States trying to find people, chiropractors, and to make sure that we get you to the right place that actually checks your nervous system and sees if it's communicating or not. And if it's not, what can we do to get it back to effectively communicating? Reach out to us. We will help you.
Most phone calls suck, right? Every time you're on a phone call and it drops, right? And that's what's happening in our bodies. And we don't need to have that.
No, so let's have a crystal clear phone call. So, all right, everyone, we will see you next week. Have a great week. Take care, everybody. Bye.